Welcome to A Call to Action, a series presented by Great Eastern Radio and Brattleboro Community Television. We're covering many different topics from state shutdowns to our food supply. Today we're talking with Michael Pieciak. He's the Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Financial Regulation. I'm Peter Fish-Case. Mike, welcome to A Call to Action.
Hey, thanks, Peter. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so let me get right into this. What does the Commissioner of Financial Regulation have to do with COVID-19?
So in the normal world, we regulate banks, credit unions, investment firms. Basically, we're protecting Vermonters, protecting their investments, protecting their money. So that's sort of our normal day job. However, the governor did ask myself and our department to work on modeling the disease progression in Vermont, modeling what we could anticipate for hospital demand in our state, modeling what we could expect now that we're starting to talk about reopening the state, what we could see in terms of new case count and, again, demand on the hospital, and what's the strategic and safe way to reopen our state. So this is something that obviously we don't normally work on, pandemics and modeling for pandemics, but our department does have quite a bit of experience with actuarial work. We need to be able to confirm that a life insurance company has sufficient capital to pay out on all the promises it's making, under its life insurance policies, for example. We do a lot with financial modeling to make sure, again, that banks or credit unions have sufficient capital on hand so that they can pay people when they need their money out of the bank or credit union. So those were skill sets that we had, but again, we're not epidemiologists, and we needed to get that part of the skill set as well. But I think we were well positioned to do some of this work.
All right. So when I was doing my research on you, trying to figure out why you were the guy to talk to, I want to touch on something, and I think you'll probably have an answer for me. I just received a small kickback from my insurance company of $46. And when I was reading about you and all the things that you do, why is my insurance company giving me money back?
Yeah, great question. So if you think about you getting a policy for a year, let's say on your auto insurance side, you're anticipated that you're going to be covered for 12 months of risk, right? You're out driving around, you're going to work, you're going to social events. However, as we all know, the month of March pretty much, and the month of April certainly, and part of May, we're all at home. We're not, for the most part, going to work. We're not certainly driving to our friends' houses and all of that thing. So the amount that we drive has been reduced significantly, and the amount of claims that auto insurance companies are paying out has dropped dramatically. So we've been working with our auto insurance companies saying, the risk is really not the same as when you anticipated this at the beginning of the year. And as a result, you really should be providing refunds to Vermonters to take into account the reduced risk, the fact that Vermonters are driving less and therefore having less accidents, less claims are being made, and that Vermonters should benefit from that reduction. So, I think the average is probably, somewhere around your size of the check that you got, $50.
Yeah.
But every little bit helps, certainly, we think, on the financial side, but it's also the appropriate thing to do. I mean, you were driving less, we are all driving less. So we should see that reduction in our auto policies.
Right. Well, that's amazing. It was something like when I saw it come through, my wife was checking online banking. She asked me what I purchased from our insurance company. I said nothing. And because you're just so used to seeing it come out and not go back in. So,
yeah, exactly right. To see it come back in was probably a little shocking. So at this point, we have 96% of all the policies issued in Vermont have some sort of refund associated with it. So that's the vast percentage of the market. We're working on the last 4%, but that 4% represents many different carriers that only have a few policies in the state. So the vast majority of Vermonters should be seeing a refund similar to the one that you saw in your checking account.
Now, will that move forward now from here until things sort of return back to normal? And then what's that line look like?
Yeah, so every company had a little bit different approach. Some of them said we'll do it for 2 months. Some of them said we'll do it for 6 months, just to account for a reduction in risk for the rest of the year. Every plan that we approved from an insurance company, we added in the flexibility to extend the period of time. Because even, as let's say let's say that we're reopened by middle of May or by late May, people might not be out driving about in the same way they did, in January and February. So even if a stay-at-home order is relaxed or released, we still want to make sure that the risk is similar to what it was priced for. And if people are staying home and not driving, that needs to be taken into account as well. So again, most of them had a 2 or 3 month window, and then we'll see what the stay-at-home orders look like, and we'll also see what driving habits look like going forward.
Interesting. So it's comforting to know that somebody's sort of keeping their eye on this, I have to say. So thank you.
Yeah, and that's sort of the normal work that we do, right? That's sort of our day in
Right.
and day out job is protecting Vermont consumers and looking out for them.
Awesome. All right. Now how do you feel? And when I say that, and I mean, when I say you, I mean the state of Vermont. How has the response been to the pandemic? Say in the onset, of course. And I joke around. I think today I'm calling this March 58, but it's sort of like time stop. But from that time, which was about March 11th or 12th, when this thing whole rolled out, how do you feel the state of Vermont responded?
So the people of Vermont, I think, responded in a way that we didn't anticipate. I mean, they responded so well. They were highly compliant with every order from the governor. It's clear that Vermonters are following, social distancing practices. It's clear they're following guidelines about mask usage and hygiene guidance. You can't say everybody is doing it, but when we look at Vermont and we compare that to our New England counterparts, just on mobility, for example. So, it certainly probably gives some people pause, and it sounds like Big Brother, but there are a lot of companies out there that you voluntarily allow them to track your location on your phone. When you download an app and it says allowed to sort of track you, and you say yes, what they're basically doing is then selling that data to other companies that sort of aggregate it and anonymize it, and then you can sort of see how frequently people move around a particular state. And so, for example, if we pick Vermont, we saw some of the greatest declines in mobility compared to any other state across the country, and particularly relating to New England. So what that tells us is that Vermonters really were highly compliant with the social distancing protocols. They were making all of the personal, professional, and other sacrifices that we were asking of them. And really, it's only because of that reason. I mean, that's the reason that we stopped the virus progression in its tracks. We were growing at a pretty heavy rate in the middle of March, like a 30 to 40% sort of case growth rate. And the social distancing measures went out. Vermonters were highly compliant with them. And the virus, again, the growth rate the brakes just got slammed on it. And it is now in the, less than 1% sort of category in terms of the growth rate. So that's really great to see.
Yeah, no, so that is good. And I think that, I think that everybody who the whole executive branch I think they reacted quickly. So I was pretty pleased with how these things rolled out. Now, numbers can often get daunting, but when we're crunching numbers around life and death, like you've been, I mean, how much more daunting does that get?
Yeah, I mean, it was really kind of a surreal experience because when we first did our first calculation, right, and again, this whole in some ways it's an experiment, the social distancing, because we haven't seen this implemented in a significant way in 100 years, right? So we don't know how effective it's going to be. We don't know how compliant people are going to be with the orders. So as we're doing our first set of modeling, and it shows, a worst case scenario could be, hundreds of people in the ICU, hundreds of people needing ventilators, thousands of people needing hospital beds, and we don't necessarily have the capacity for all of those things, right? So that's really daunting and can be unnerving, right? When you're thinking about the task at hand. Okay, we need to flatten the curve. We need to slow the disease progression. But we also need to build out our hospital capacity. So it was really a twofold strategy, and we were very fortunate that Vermonters were highly compliant. That we flattened the curve, if you will. And we were also at the same time able to build up our hospital capacity in the event that we weren't as successful. So I can remember, again, when we first ran our first numbers, and you start thinking, who are these, it's not just numbers anymore. You start thinking about the fact that, oh my God, people in Brattleboro might not have an emergency room available to them. They might not have an ICU unit available to them. They might not have a ventilator when they need one. And you saw scenes unfolding in Italy and other places where they were experiencing that, and it was really sobering and quite surreal, as I said.
Yeah. Well, I mean, both you and I have family in this state, so I mean, unfortunately, we might be a little bit more emotionally attached to running those numbers than other folks. But let's talk about projections, and let's spend a few minutes on that. All indications are that we're going to do a second round of the coronavirus, and that will hit in the fall. And of course, after a whole summer with relaxed regulations. I mean, have you guys run numbers on that? What does that look like for Vermont?
Yeah. So, right from the beginning, we always said that, we have the greatest amount of confidence in the short term. So let's call it like a month to 2 months out. And that still is the case. I mean, so many things can happen between now and 2 months from now. That's really hard to predict. So there are a lot of predictions about a second wave. Let's call it November, December, the same time the flu might come about. And certainly that's on our radar. But the thing that we're focused on right now is what happens in the rest of the month of May and June and July as social distancing measures get relaxed. We want to make sure that we don't see, an increase in cases over the summer. That would give us a cause for concern because, there is some scientific evidence out there that humidity and heat do impact the virus. But at the same time, it's not conclusive and we don't know to what degree that's the case. So we have to also assume that by relaxing social distancing measures in the short term, there might be an impact on cases as well. So we're really, really focused on the summer with an eye obviously toward the fall as well, and what a real second wave might bring in November and December.
Right. Yeah. I'm one of the things that I'm concerned about is that we do get relaxed and people start to feel normal again. And then the chains get thrown back on and what those reactions might look like. But again, I think we're fairly fortunate. We live in a state that tends to kind of listen to the science behind it all.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Now it's safe to say that the calculations that you are doing here now will do these same kind of calculations carry over to our border neighbors like Mass, New York, New Hampshire? I mean, are they forced to use different metrics, or are they kind of using the same metrics you're using?
So, we've been working with, so I should mention at the beginning, we said that we're not epidemiologists. So what we did was we went and found basically 4 different partners that we work with on modeling. So 2 of them are academic. One is from Northeastern, one is from Columbia. One of them is in the professional sort of public space from a big, large consulting firm. And then one of them is very well publicized entity called IHME out of Washington. They're also academic as well. So with those 4 modelers that have plenty of epidemiologists and very smart people on staff, we were able to build out some of these scenarios for Vermont. So they're working with a number of other states as well, but there's really not a uniform approach. And I think it speaks to some of the concerns that we have with the federal response, not the state response, but the federal response, that we really didn't necessarily have a place we could go to get this kind of modeling done at the federal level, nor were there really any guidelines as to, these are the metrics you should be following as a state. So we all kind of had to scramble and do that ourselves. And then I can't say for sure whether New Hampshire and Massachusetts are looking at the same type of modeling that we're looking at, but we can, through the lens that we're looking through, get a sense of how well New Hampshire, Maine, upstate New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut are doing compared to us. And that is something that we have to keep an eye on because, as you can imagine, and as I mean, New England is such a small area geographically that people can drive to any of those states in a single day. And as Vermont continues to do well compared to our counterparts, Vermont will look like a more and more attractive place to ride out the pandemic, or even to just take a trip or enjoy some of the summertime. So that's a concern that we have, is that retransmission of the disease from other places in New England.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's cause for concern, and I don't want to be this guy who closes borders And I think I was a little vocal around Leahy's original statement about stay at home. When now I'm kind of rethinking my position on his. So, and it's not that I don't want to leave our state open, for people to come and visit. I just wish they would be smart about it. One of the things
Yeah.
I do here in a call to action is I always kind of tend to ask a question that will likely not have a concrete answer. And I always say that nobody pandemics well, and that we're all trying to fix the car while it's moving. Um, how have your calculations changed from the onset versus now, and looking forward? I mean,
Yeah, it's a great question because, and we said this right off the top when we started to publicly talk about our projections, but the methodology and the assumptions were going to change over time, right? And what I mean by that, let's just stick with the assumptions. So at the beginning, we were only looking at data coming out of China. China had experienced the pandemic first. They were weeks ahead of other places in the country. So when we were looking at how many people that get the virus need hospital care, how many people that get the virus need ICU care or ventilator care, that was the only data set that we could really look at with any degree of confidence. As the weeks wore on, and as there was more and more concern that maybe the data out of China wasn't transparent and accurate, there were some questions about that. We quickly were able to incorporate assumptions and data from Italy and from Spain and some other European countries. So then we had multiple places to build these assumptions from. So that was very helpful. And still now we can build additional assumptions from US data as well. So basically our assumptions changed over time. They became more accurate, I would say, because we now have a larger sample size, not just one country, but multiple countries and multiple experiences. The other thing with the methodology, there are different approaches to this, but most of the methodologies were built off of the Chinese sort of, curve. And again, as you get more examples of other countries experiencing this, you can change your methodology a little bit.
right.
Recently, our modeler started adding in mobility data. So we talked about this earlier. So basically, how frequently are people going to work? How frequently are they going to the grocery store? How frequently are they out of their house driving around? By folding in that mobility data, it gives us a more accurate picture, we think, of the likelihood of transmission of the virus. So again, that gives a little bit more accurate opinion. So I would say that we're going to continue to refine them into the future. But I would say, and probably each one of our modelers would say this, and anyone that's working with modelers in state government across the country, that we feel much more confident about our ability to project and model now than we did 6 or 7 weeks ago. But again, it's still a forecast, and it's still used for planning purposes. It's not used for exact science and precision. But for that reason, for planning purposes, it's really effective.
Okay, good. That's fair enough. Well, I know you're busy, so let me just ask: is there any other information out there that maybe we haven't covered that you would want to get out there?
So one thing I would mention is if people are interested, they can go to our department's website, dfr.vermont.gov, and all of our models are available, and all of our modeling partners are also available on our website. It has interactive models if our modelers have them as well, so people can go and sort of play around with it a little bit and see the methodologies that are being used and the assumptions being used. So that's something we put up about 2 weeks ago, and think it's important for Vermonters to get to see that and understand it for themselves if they'd like. So I would direct people to there for our website. Also on our website is a lot of information about actions that we've taken in response to COVID-19 for our financial institutions. So things that benefit Vermonters, from healthcare policy to banking policy to insurance policy. So another good place of information for people to go and look at that information. I think the only thing that we haven't touched on that's worth mentioning is sort of the economic impact of all of this.
Yeah.
When we were setting out and doing our work in mid-March, there's probably a 3-day lag in my own brain between realizing this was a public health crisis to realizing, oh, there's also a economic crisis that's right on its heels. It's right there. And there's been a lot of question about what's the best approach to balancing those two things. I think Vermont has done it well. I don't think you can respond to the economic crisis until the health crisis is under control, and there's some good concrete progress that's being made on that front. There's research out of the Federal Reserve that shows that states and regions that responded aggressively and early to the 1918 pandemic had better long-term economic consequences as a result. So I know it's challenging for people, and it's really a struggle for businesses and individuals, but the best long-term strategy is really to progress out of this slowly, to make sure we don't have a spike in cases over the summer, and that we can manage our way through a potential second wave in the fall. So I think it's just a message of, all of us in state government understand the sacrifices and the economic strain this is putting on people. And that's part of the decision making, is how do we get through this as quickly as possible so that economic strain doesn't last longer than it needs to.
Right. I use some brutal terminology that basically says if people are dying, nobody's buying. So.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Peter. I mean, we showed a slide 2 weeks ago that talked about the amount of deaths we could have anticipated by the end of May if we had put no interventions in place. And for Vermont, that number on the high side was over 2,000. So I was making the point that if the government didn't shut the economy down, the economy would have shut itself down, because people are not going out and buying things and living their normal lives when that kind of death and disease and despair is sort of all around us.
Right. So we'll just keep doing it. We'll get through it. Thanks.
Yes, although the governor we have started some slow steps to reopening, and we'll continue to have a methodical approach to that. So again, we think we handled this well on the way in, and we want to make sure we handle it well on the way out as well.
Well, so far, thumbs up for me, and thank you for my insurance refund.
You're welcome.
All right. All right. Michael Pieciak, thanks for jumping on a call to action with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.